Hi students, you already know that the physics is the science of nature. So if we want to understand the physical phenomena, we should introduce some parameters. These parameters are called quantities. Quantities. Which quantities do we already know? For example, in our daily life, we use a majority of the quantities such as mass or volume or length or temperature, force, speed, and etc. We use these quantities in our daily life. But in physics, there are two main types of quantities. First one is scalar quantities, and the other one is vector quantities. What's the difference between scalar and vector quantities? Scalar quantities has only magnitude. It means only value. But vector quantities have magnitude and direction. Let's try to give some examples about scalar and vector quantities. So while you are talking about any scalar quantity, that means you need only magnitude of the parameter. For example, you are trying to buy 5 kilogram potatoes from the groceries, right? So you need only the magnitude of this parameter. 5 kilograms is enough information to buy it. So you don't need any direction, right? So mass is a scalar quantity. And temperature, what's the temperature of the weather today? You say that, for example, it is 20 degrees Celsius. So that's enough. There is no direction while you are talking about the temperature of anything. So temperature is also a scalar quantity. But some quantities, while we are talking about, for example, the velocity of airplane or cars, so you say that it is 60 kilometers per hour. But may I ask the direction? In which direction you are moving? Yes, I can ask. It's not funny to ask the direction of the velocity. But talking about the mass, it was funny, right? For example, I bought 5 kilogram potatoes. In which direction you have bought this one? So this is a funny question. You don't need the direction while you are talking about the mass of any object. But the vector quantity means that you can give some information about the direction of the quantity. As I said that, for example, velocity. A train is moving with the speed of 40 kilometers per hour. And the actual speed is scalar, but while we are talking about the direction, we use velocity. So we should separate it. Speed is scalar. Speed is only the magnitude of velocity, but the velocity itself is a vector quantity. Telling the velocity, you should consider the direction of the object. So you can easily say that the car is moving with 60 km per hour velocity in the direction to the north, for example. So you should consider the direction while you are talking about the velocity of any object, or airplanes or particles. It doesn't depend on what you are talking about. So velocity is vector. And for example, force, it's a pull or push forces. You apply in your daily life some forces to the objects, right? You are trying to move the desk or chair from one place to another, so you apply some forces, and it's not funny to ask the direction. For example, you say to your dad that I am applying 40 newtons to the desk, and he asks in which direction you are pulling the desk. So this is a fundamental question. So talking about the forces, you need its direction. So the force is vector quantity. So in conclusion, we can easily say that talking about the scalar quantities, only the magnitude is enough. But talking about the vector quantities, you should talk about the magnitude and the direction as well. And let's try to have another examples for the vector quantities. For example, acceleration. Acceleration is vector quantity. And on the other hand, for example, displacement is vector quantity, but distance is scalar quantity, or volume or density, these are all, or the lengths of the objects, these are all scalar quantities. Okay, students. So, and another difference between the scalar and vector quantities, while we are talking about the scalar quantities, for example, mass, we use some letters to represent any quantity, because in the formulas we don't write the total name mass. Instead of mass we use, for example, M. Instead of temperature we use the capital T. Instead of speed we use V. Distance is represented by, let's say, L. There are so many differences in any countries. For example, sometimes this is represented by S or L or D, it doesn't depend. And volume is represented by V, and length is also represented by L. So as you see, we choose some letters for the quantities. But in the vector quantities, we again use some letters. For example, velocity has the same letter with speed. But it is a vector quantity, so there is an arrow above the letter. So it indicates that this quantity is vector quantity. Force is represented by F, a capital F, but while it's a vector quantity, so we should try to put an arrow above the letter. Acceleration is represented by A, and we put an arrow because it's a vector quantity. Displacement is represented by D, and you can put an arrow above it. So this is a vector quantity. Thank you for your attention.